Okay, let it out everyone. Alright, Wendigo stories again. Yeah, again. Okay, so people have been requesting more Wendigo stories. They're super popular, and always have been. Sue me. Am I the bad guy for listening to my fans? Perhaps, but just sit back, friends, and enjoy these new Wendigo stories I've gathered up for you. There will be a bus full of scared Boy Scouts, abusive mothers who might be more dangerous than Wendigos, and a grandmother's most terrifying story to retell. This is Unexplained Encounters. This was back in October 2016. 8 years ago now, though it feels like yesterday when I think about it. For the sake of my family's anonymity, I'll be changing the names in this story. My daughter, Sharon, called me on Wednesday, asked if I could watch Mason and Emma for the weekend. She and her husband Rick were going to Thunder Bay for their 15th anniversary. Of course, I said yes. I always said yes when it came to the grandkids. Mason was 11 then. Emma had just turned 8 that September. They were great kids. Mason was the quiet one. Had his nose in a book whenever he could fantasy stuff, I think, mostly. I remember some dragons and wizards on covers. Emma was the opposite. Couldn't sit still for 5 minutes. Full of energy. That one, they loved. Coming over to my place because I let them do things their parents wouldn't. They stayed up a bit later. Had cookies before dinner. Played in the woods out back. I live about 40 minutes outside of town, in northwestern Ontario. I won't say exactly where, just to be safe. My late husband, Earl, and I bought the property in 1,978.40 acres. Backs right onto Crown land, nothing but forest for miles and miles in every direction. We raised Sharon and her brother, David, here. They practically lived in those woods. Growing up, never had any trouble. Well, not the kind I'm about to tell you about. Anyway, the kids arrived on a Friday after school. Sharon barely got the car stopped before they were piling out. Mason lugged his backpack full of books, and Emma clutched that stuffed rabbit she carried everywhere, even though she kept insisting she was too old for stuffed animals. Be good for Grandma, Sharon called out. But they were already racing for the house. They knew I'd have fresh chocolate chip cookies waiting, because, well, I always did. That first night was normal. We had spaghetti for dinner, because that was Emma's favorite. We watched a cartoon movie about a princess. I dozed off halfway through. When I woke up, I found Mason reading by the lamp, and Emma curled up against me like a little cat. I got them both tucked into the guest room by 10 o'clock, which was pretty late for them, but that's what grandmas are for, right? Saturday morning was beautiful. We'd had frost overnight, and everything sparkled. You could see mist rising off the lake through the trees from my kitchen window. I was making pancakes when Emma came padding out in her pajamas, dragging her rabbit behind her. Grandma, can we play outside after breakfast? Of course you can, sweetheart. Just bundle up warm. It's chilly out. Mason appeared then, already dressed, with another book in his hand. That boy was probably reading while he was sleeping. After breakfast, which was pancakes with real maple syrup, gift from our neighbors, they practically flew out the door. I watched from the window as they raced across the backyard toward the trees. We had rules, of course. Stay within shouting distance. Don't go past the big fallen oak tree that was about a 5-minute walk into the forest, and come back in. When I rang the dinner bell, which was really just me shouting, they knew all the rules. They'd been coming here since they were tiny. I puttered around the kitchen, did some dishes, started a pot of soup for lunch. It was maybe an hour later when I heard them coming back, both of them talking excitedly. They burst through the door, pin-cheeked from the cold. Grandma, Emma was tugging on my sweater. There's something weird in the woods. I dried my hands on a dish towel. What kind of weird, honey? Mason said. There's these marks on the trees, like scratches, really high off the ground, like way higher than we can reach. We get black bears around here all the time. The occasional grizzly passes through, too. Well, that's what I've heard. I figured that's what it was, bears scratching on trees, marking territory before winter. Nothing weird about that. Oh, just bears. Loves, you know what to do if you see one, right? They both nodded. Make noise, back away slowly, and don't run. We'd been over it a dozen times. But Emma wasn't satisfied with that. It's not bear marks, Grandma, they're too high for that, even for a big bear. And they look like, she held up her hand, fingers spread wide, like something with really, really long fingers did it. Kids and their imaginations. I gave them a snack apple, slices and cheese, and sent them back out with instructions to stay closer to the house. They agreed, but I could see they were excited now. It was an adventure for them. A new mystery to solve. They came in for lunch around noon, grilled cheese and tomato soup, another of their favorites. They chattered the whole time about what they'd found. More scratches, all of them way up high, places where the undergrowth was all flattened down, to like something had been walking or trampling or lying down there. Mason, always the little scientist, wanted to borrow my bird-watching binoculars to look for tracks. I let him, figuring it would keep them busy. I remember I was folding laundry when they came back the next time, around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I knew right away something was different now. Emma wasn't bouncing. Mason wasn't talking. They stood at the back door, and I could see it in their faces. Something had spooked them. "What is it now?" I asked, opening the door. Mason spoke quietly. "There's something out there, Grandma. We heard it, and I think it followed us." "It followed you? What do you mean?" Emma got close to her brother and said, "When we walked, it walked, and when we stopped, it stopped. We couldn't see it, but it stayed back in the thick trees. And it smelled weird," Mason added. "Like, remember when Dad forgot those hamburgers in the car last summer? Rotten meat." That gave me chills. I kept calm in front of them. Didn't want to scare them worse. Probably just a deer. They're curious sometimes. And animals die out there, you know, and they rot, too. Unfortunately. You may have not seen it, but you probably walked past a dead animal. Come inside. I'll make you some hot chocolate. But, for the first time ever, they didn't want hot chocolate. Mason had found tracks, he said, big ones, different from anything he'd seen in nature books. Would I come look? Just to the edge of the woods. "Please, Grandma." I should have said no. Should have kept them inside, called their parents, packed them up right then and there, and drove to town. But I was still thinking bears, or even moose. Maybe just their imaginations running wild. And I didn't want to be the grandma who was scared of shadows. So, I pulled on Earl's old jacket and followed them out. The tracks were by an old tree, maybe 50 feet from the house. We'd had rain the week before, so the ground there was still soft, perfect for holding impressions. When I saw them, my mouth went dry. They weren't bear tracks. In all my years, I'd seen plenty of bear tracks. These weren't moose or deer, either. What freaked me out was that they looked human, almost human, but wrong. The foot was very long and very narrow. The toes, if you could call them toes, were stretched out, with these markings at the tips. Like they were claws that had dug into the earth, but the worst of it was the stride. I'm no tracker or professional, but even I could see that whatever made these prints had very, very long legs. The distance between steps was huge. "See, Grandma," Emma whispered. "Weird, right?" Before I could answer, we heard something, a sound from deeper in the woods. I've lived in the bush most of my life. I've heard wolves and bears, and mountain cats. This wasn't any of those. It wasn't quite a howl, wasn't quite a scream, but I swear to you, it was something in between. Something that made every hair on my body stand on end. Something that reaches right into the old parts of your brain. The part that remembers when humans were prey. The kids got real close to me, and I could feel Emma trembling. "Inside," I said, my voice sharper now. "Right now." We walked back to the house. Not running, though every part of me screamed to run. Running felt dangerous, like it would trigger something to chase us. I felt us being watched. You know that feeling when you absolutely know something is looking at you. The weight of it was like cold fingers on the back of my neck. Once inside, I locked the door, all the doors. Actually checked every window, too, and drew all the curtains. The kids and I huddled up on the couch, and for the first time since they'd arrived, Mason was not reading. "Grandma, what was that?" he said in a small voice. I didn't know what to say, so I did what grandmothers do. I made dinner like nothing happened, kept things normal for them. But while the roast was in the oven, I called my neighbor, Robert. He lived only about a quarter mile down the road. I made it sound casual, just checking in, asking if he had noticed anything strange lately, any unusual animals around. "Funny, you should ask," he told me. "Lost 2 chickens this week. Something tore right through the coop, strong wire, too, you know, the good stuff. And the dogs have been going crazy at night, barking and carrying on in the forest. Won't go near the tree line after dark, though that cold feeling in my stomach got worse." After dinner, the kids barely ate. I set them up in the living room with another movie. Told them we'd have a campout tonight, all of us together in one room. Made it sound fun, instead of what it really was. They seemed relieved not to be sleeping alone in the guest room. I pulled out blankets and pillows, and made a big nest on the floor. But I didn't sleep, not 1 minute. I sat in Earl's old recliner, the one that faced the big picture window. I kept all the lights off inside so I could see out, and I waited. The kids fell asleep, eventually Emma first, then Mason, fighting it, but he finally gave in. I sat there, listening to them breathe, watching our yard. It must have been around midnight when I saw something. I hoped it was just shadows from the trees moving, but it was a windless night. Everything was still. Then I realized the shadow was standing at the edge of where the porch light reached. Standing and swaying a bit, back and forth. It was tall. So tall. I'm no good with measurements, but it had to be 7, maybe 8 feet, and disgustingly thin. Like if you chewed a person up like bubblegum, spat them out, and pulled them thin. The thing stood there, swaying. Then it took a step forward into the light. I bit down on my knuckle to keep from making a sound. That thing was covered in something fur. Maybe, or maybe it was skin, but it looked patchy, like a dog with mange. Its arms hung down past its knees, way past, and its hands were definitely like a person's. They had fingers, but they were very long. I thought of those scratches on the trees, way up high, and my stomach turned. But the face, I will never forget the face. The eyes were sunken in, real deep. They caught the light like an animal's, the way they shined. A wide, lipless mouth, just a little open, like it was tasting the air. I could see the faint glow of teeth, too many teeth for any mouth to hold. When it began to move, it moved unnaturally, like every one of its limbs was broken and couldn't heal. It crawled here and there and would stand back up, looking at my house, looking at the window where I sat. Could it see me in the dark there? I don't know. I hope not. I knew with absolute certainty that if my grandkids had still been outside, if they'd been in those woods after dark, they would have never come back. Maybe worse, maybe they would have come back, but wrong. I don't know how long I watched it, or how long it watched me. Time went funny then. Could have been 5 minutes, maybe an hour. But eventually, the thing turned and went back into the forest. It didn't walk exactly, more like lurched, but faster than something that moved like that should be able to move. I stayed in that chair until the sun came up, didn't move an inch, and I didn't fall asleep. I waited and watched. A couple of times, I swear I heard something on the porch, like footsteps, but very quiet, careful and quiet. At once, I swear I heard breathing right outside the window, but I didn't look this time. I couldn't look, just sat there, praying for daylight. Soon as the sun was properly up, I got the kids up and packed. I told them I wasn't feeling very well, and I needed to take them home. They didn't argue. Actually, I think they were relieved. Kids know more than we give them credit for sometimes. On the drive to Sharon's longest hour of my life, Fema piped up from the back seat. "Grandma, that thing in the woods, do you think it was a wind?" I raised an eyebrow, though she couldn't see it. "Now, where did you hear that?" Mason said. "I read about it in a book." It sounded like the stories. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Mason was staring out the window, but I could see his reflection. Poor kid looked older now, like he'd figured something out that a child that age never should have. "Oh, those are just stories, honey," I said finally. "Just old stories people tell." But I was lying. When we got to Sharon's, I told her the kids had gotten spooked playing in the woods, maybe saw a bear. She laughed it off, said they both had overactive imaginations, especially Mason with all those books he reads. I let her believe that. I didn't want to say anything else. If I told her that something that looked like a broken man and had too many teeth had stalked her children, I'd never see them again, and she would beg me to move away from that land. Well, funny I say that, because I sold the house the following spring. I couldn't do another night there, couldn't stand checking the windows, jumping at every sound, wondering if some long fingers were reaching for my door handle any moment, and the idea that if I wanted to see my grandkids here, they might be stalked by this thing again. Nope, couldn't do it. I found a nice little condo in town, 2nd floor, lots of neighbors, streetlights, no trees for anything to hide behind. Before I was able to move, the kids never asked to go back to the old house, and nowadays, they don't even ask about it. We don't talk about what happened, but sometimes when Emma visits, she's 16 now, taller than me, I catch her looking out the window at the woods nearby. She'll move away from it casually, but I know she remembers. Mason's in university. It's good to see them growing up, but heartbreaking nonetheless. Robert, my old neighbor, called me about a year after I moved, wanted to know if I'd had any trouble at my place. He said something had gotten into his barn, killing 3 goats. Whatever it was, didn't even eat them, just killed them and left them laid out in a row. and his grandson, visiting for the summer, kept saying he saw a tall man in the woods, watching the house. I was going fishing from Teller. This all started in May 2023. Fishing is my hobby, and I usually fish late after work. I get to the local lake around 7 o'clock and fish until midnight or so. The walleye bite better at dusk and after dark. Anyway, I've got myself a 16-foot aluminum boat. Nothing crazy, just a 25-horse Mercury and a fish finder. One night in May, I was anchored up in my usual spot near the North Shore. There's a weed bed there that drops off into about 20 feet of water. While I cruised the edge right at sunset, I was watching my rod tip, waiting for that telltale tap, when I saw some movement on the shore. The way the sun was setting, the trees were mostly silhouettes, but I could see something moving between them, for sure. Deer probably. Lots of deer up there. But that little voice in the back of my head was saying that deer don't move like that. Looked like someone was crawling. Have you ever seen someone do that military crawl under barbed wire? It really reminded me of that, but faster than a soldier. It moved along the shoreline for maybe 30 yards, then stopped. I couldn't make out much in the fading light, but I think it was watching me. The thing stopped and turned toward the water. Me, and I had this feeling that made the hair on my arm stand up. And just like that, it was gone, back into the deeper woods. The whole thing lasted maybe 20 seconds. I stayed out another hour, caught 2 nice walleye, but I kept looking at that spot on the shore. Nothing else happened. When I got home, I figured it was either one of 2 things. A couple of raccoons moving in sync, or someone camping and being drunk. Some weirdo crawling around. That lake, in particular, gets the occasional camper, but not that many. Next week, same spot, same time. I wasn't even thinking about what happened last time. Not until I anchored up. Everything was normal for the first hour. I caught a small pike and released it. Around 9:30, still some light in the sky, I saw it again. This time, it was further down the shore, about 50 yards from where I saw it before. Same crawling movement, but I got a better look. It certainly looked like a man, but something was ringing alarm bells about it. Might have been the way it reminded me of reeling in a fish. The way it might struggle when it hits land stop. Start, stop, start motion. But still covering ground fast. Like it would freeze for a second, then go forward, then freeze again. I grabbed my phone, not actually thinking about taking a picture, but rather thinking about using the camera to zoom in, to see if I could see what it was. But by the time I lifted my phone up, the thing was gone. I noticed something new then. The birds had gone quiet. If you spend enough time outdoors, you know that kind of quiet. The way everything stops making any noise when something dangerous might be about. I pulled anchor and moved to the other side of the lake that night. I didn't catch anything else. The third time was 2 weeks later. I'd been busy with work, missed a week, almost didn't go that night because it was overcast. Looked like rain. But the forecast said the storms would hold off until after midnight, so I took the risk. I tried a different spot on the eastern shore. There's a little bay there with a creek running in, a good spot for pike. I'd been there maybe an hour when I began to hear splashing from the creek mouth, not like a beaver, but more like a person treading through water. Something was wading down the creek, toward the lake. I turned on my headlamp and aimed it at the creek. The splashing sound stopped immediately. Dead silence. I kept the light on the creek mouth for maybe a full, minute nothing. Then, just at the edge of the light, I saw eyes reflecting back. Height of a person. A bit taller than that, actually. But the eyes were too far apart, and when they blinked, I swear they blinked sideways. Like a bird's, or maybe a snake's eyes, or something. Surely there's a reptile that does that. I started my motor and got out of there. I didn't pull my lines in first, either just cut them. Lost to good rigs, but I didn't care at the moment. The smart thing would have been to find a new lake. Plenty of good fishing spots up here, but this lake was my spot. I'd been fishing it for so long, a couple of decades, at least. Some malnourished hermit wasn't going to chase me off. That's what I told myself, anyway. So, I kept going back. I started bringing a spotlight, the one of those handheld ones that plugs into the boat battery. Million candle power, and I started to pay more attention, keeping notes, even what time I saw it, where it would be, what I was doing, what it was doing. June 15th. Saw it on the west shore around 10 p.m. Walking upright, this time along the tree line. Looked like it was dragging something, but couldn't tell what. June 22nd. Nothing seen, but I heard wood knocking sounds from the north shore. Kind of like a woodpecker. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. lasted about 10 minutes. July 4th. Holiday weekend. Lake was busier than usual. 3 other boats out. Didn't see anything. But one of the other fishermen pulled up to me around 11 o'clock. Asked if I'd seen that tall guy on the shore. He said he'd been watching their boat from the trees. And they were leaving. July 18th. Hot night. Dead calm. Fish weren't biting. Around 11:30. Something swam past my boat. And I swear it wasn't no beaver or otter. Too big. Made a wake like when you're trolling with a big deep diving crankbait. That V-shaped disturbance with nothing visible on the surface. It went toward the north shore. Then I heard it come out of the water, heavy slapping sounds, like wet canvas hitting rocks. Then nothing. By August, I was seeing it almost every time I went out, sometimes crawling, sometimes walking. Once I saw it climbing a tree. It went up a big pine like a mud puppy goes up a dock post, using its whole body, undulating. Must have gone 40 feet up in less than a minute. It stayed up there the whole time I fished, just a dark shape against the tree. Trunk gave me real bad vibes. The smell started in September. Smelled like bait shrimp left in your tackle box for a week in July. But it wasn't consistent. Sometimes I'd catch a whiff when the wind shifted. Sometimes it was so strong I'd gag. Always seemed to come from different directions. Maybe it was circling the lake. Circling me. September 20th. That was when things got bad. Real bad. I'd gone out later than usual. Didn't get on the water until almost 9 o'clock. The full walleye bite had been good, and I wanted to fill my freezer for winter. I anchored up in my usual spot on the north shore. It was darker than normal new moon, and overcast. I could barely see the shoreline, even with my eyes adjusted. Around 10:30, I heard branches breaking on the shore knot. Small branches, big ones. Crack, crack, getting closer to the water. I hid my spotlight and swept it over the tree line. There it was. I found it standing right at the water's edge, full view, no more than 30 yards from my boat. This was the first time I really saw it shift. It's hard to explain, but the way its skin moved, it was like there was something underneath it, trying to get comfortable. It didn't run when the light hit it. It just stood there. Then it took a step into the water. I yanked my anchor so hard I nearly flipped out the boat. I got the motor started on the 3rd pull. It was waist deep by then, and still coming. I gunned it out toward the middle of the lake. When I looked back, it was standing in the shallows, watching me. Then it turned and walked back to shore. But it didn't go back into the woods. It started to walk along the shore, matching my direction. I needed to get to the boat launch, which meant following the shore around to the south end of the lake, 3 miles of shoreline, and that thing was following me. I stayed as far from shore as I could, but that lake isn't that big. I could see it moving in the trees, keeping up with me. Sometimes it would come out onto rocky points, standing in full view. It wasn't even trying to hide anymore. About halfway to the launch, it somehow got ahead of me. I don't know how. I was maybe doing 20 miles per hour, and it just appeared further down the shore. It was like it knew where I was going. It walked out onto a fallen tree that extended into the water, and sat down on the end of it, waiting for me. I stopped the boat. I was maybe 100 yards away from it, and it just sat there, on that log. Those arms with too many bends folded up like a grasshopper's legs. I saw its silhouette tilt its head at me. Then it slipped off the log and got into the water. I've never run a boat motor that hard. I thought for sure I was going to blow it up. I could see the wake of something behind me in the moonlight, but I couldn't see where it was. I kept that throttle wide open and headed for the launch. When I got there, I didn't even tie the boat off properly, just ran it up on the shore, grabbed my keys, and ran for my truck. I could hear something coming through the water behind me, not swimming, more like it was running through the shallows, and fast. I made it to my truck, locked those doors, and peeled out. In my rearview mirror, lit up by taillights, I saw it standing in the middle of the access road, just standing there, watching, looking almost disappointed. I went back the next morning with 2 buddies to get my boat. I told them I'd had engine trouble and had to leave it in a hurry. They helped me load it up. One of the guys pointed out some tracks in the mud nearby where I'd beached the boat. They looked like prints from bare feet. I didn't say anything about it. Haven't been back to that lake since. Don't even fish much anymore, anywhere. I tried a few other spots, but I can't shake that feeling. To be honest, I think that thing has me afraid of the dark. My wife thinks I'm crazy for giving up fishing. Says I'm letting one bad night ruin everything I love. She's right, but then again, she wasn't there. Didn't see it slip into the water like that. Didn't hear it running through the shallows right behind her. The Boy Scouts incident from Anonymous. This happened in 2009. When I was 13, I was in the Boy Scouts. We were coming back from a regional jamboree in Wisconsin, one of those big weekend things with troops from 3 states. We had fun camping competitions, knot tying and fire building, and all that stuff. Our troop had done pretty well. I think got second place in orienteering, which was pretty big for us. There were 17 of us on that bus, plus Mr. H, who was driving, and Assistant Scoutmaster J, riding shotgun. It was one of those short yellow school buses, the kind churches and scout troops buy secondhand. Ours was a 1994 piece of junk that smelled like old vinyl and diesel exhaust. But it was ours. The drive back was supposed to take about 4 hours. We'd left the jamboree grounds around 6 o'clock in the evening, planning to get home by 10 o'clock. Most of the younger kids had already crashed out, exhausted from the long weekend. I was in the back with my buddy T and a few other guys, playing cards by the dome light. Around 8:30, Mr. H pulled off at a rest stop. It wasn't a big interstate one. It was on Highway 53, I think. Just a little parking area with picnic tables and outhouses. He said he needed to stretch his legs, and we could use the facilities if we needed. About half of us piled out to use the bathrooms, move around, or act up. It was getting dark. The rest stop was surrounded raid. I waited until the sun was fully up before I dared to climb down. My hands were so stiff I could barely grip the rungs. I nearly fell twice. When I finally made it inside, Mom was in the kitchen, making coffee. "Where were you?" she asked. Didn't even look at me. I didn't answer. I just went to my room and lay down, still in my jacket and shoes, shaking, not from cold anymore. She never asked why I'd been gone all night. Never noticed the blood on my lip from where she'd hit me. Never noticed anything. But I noticed things after that. Noticed how sometimes the deer in our yard stood too long in one place. Caught glimpses of twisted or broken antlers in the trees for a moment. Because I think it was still out there. It didn't come back into the yard again. But it was there, always just out of sight. It was waiting for something. I left home when I was 17. I joined the army the day after graduation. Just to get away from Mom, from the house, from whatever that thing was. I've been gone 25 years now. Mom died 10 years ago. Drank herself to death, surprising no one. Didn't attend her funeral, and I'll never be going back home. You'd have to drag me there, or kill me first.